Hello, everyone. This is Stephanie Bozar. Thank you so much for calling in, and we are really excited to share this webinar with you about cultivating a relationship with your lawmaker. This is such an important piece of being an advocate, and that's something that you will be able to use these skills throughout the time that you're advocating at any point. So Diane Pickles, who is the Vice President of M&R, is someone that we partner with, and she is going to be doing the webinar tonight. So thank you so much for being with us, and always feel free to contact the MPS Society or myself, Stephanie Bozarth, for any additional questions or follow-up. Thanks, Diane.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. So this is Diane Pickles, and I am thrilled to join you this evening, and thank you for taking time out of busy schedules and lives to join us this evening. I just want to run through a couple quick logistics before we jump into the content of the webinar. We are going to keep lines muted throughout the webinar. It just helps our sound quality, but you can be are welcome to type in questions at any time during the webinar in the question or chat box on your GoToWebinar pane or panel, whichever you prefer to call it. And we can take questions at the end of the webinar. So if you have a question, we won't unmute lines to take those, but we can definitely save time for questions at the end. So if you have a question you would like to ask, please don't hesitate to type that in, and I will save time for that. We are recording tonight's webinar, and those recordings are made available on the National MPS Society's website after the webinar. So you will likely get an email to let you know that that recording is available. The PowerPoint slides will also be made available to you, as well as a one-pager. I think it's actually a two-page document that summarizes some of the key points from the webinar, and those materials will be made available as well. My email address and phone number are also at the end of the webinar. You can certainly feel free to reach out to myself, or as Stephanie said, to her if you have any questions, want more information, etc. We want to be helpful in any way that we can. So without further ado, I'm going to dive into the webinar. This is one of a series of webinars that I've done for the Society, and we try to keep them short and really informative. So I kind of move through them quickly. We try to keep a lot of good information in a really short, kind of action-packed format, if you will. I just want to sort of introduce myself, my firm, very, very briefly. M&R Strategic Services is an advocacy consulting firm. We're based in Washington, D.C. I work out of our New England office, and I have had the unbelievable pleasure and honor of working for the National MPS Society for the last several years. And my work has really focused in helping the advocacy committee really organize some of its grassroots advocacy work, training advocates, helping think through some of its messaging and strategy. I've done a lot of webinars such as tonight's webinar, and some kind of how-to documents and materials for advocates as well. And it's been such amazing work. I've learned a ton from the folks at the Society, from Stephanie and others, and have just so enjoyed the work that I've had a chance to do. At M&R, I work with a lot of different advocacy groups from a wide array of nonprofit organizations, including many health organizations, health advocacy organizations, and patient advocacy organizations. So tonight's topic, we are really going to dive into thinking about how to get to know your lawmakers, how to build a relationship with them, how to cultivate them so that we can be good advocates. And it's so important because that decision maker advocacy piece is such a big part of what we do at the Society to advance the policy goals that we fight for, which is really about fighting for funding for research, as well as fighting for some of the policies that will make sure that we can advance rare diseases, broadly speaking, rare disease policy, and very specifically to work towards finding better treatments and one day a cure for MPS and related diseases. So our goal this evening, our goals are to do a couple things. First and foremost, we want to really encourage you as advocates to build relationships with your lawmakers by making it as easy as possible. Demystify it a bit, really help you think about it as something that's easy to do, We're going to start really basic and simple by making sure you know how to find them, who your lawmakers are, your federal. We're going to focus on federal lawmakers, but I am happy to help people think about their state level lawmakers as well. Most of the society's policy work is focused at the federal level. And so we're going to focus on those federal lawmakers. But as I said, happy to talk through some of the state level lawmakers as well if people want to get in touch with me after the webinar. We're going to provide some information and tools to make it easy and comfortable to engage with those lawmakers, those members of Congress, and give some tips and suggestions for how to get to know them, to really think about, again, how to cultivate them and really build that relationship with them. So those are our goals for this evening. I wanted to start with a really basic but super important concept, which is understanding your power as an advocate. So when we think about grassroots advocacy, and grassroots advocacy is really anybody is a grassroots advocate potentially. So anybody who is a constituent, meaning you live in the district that is represented by a lawmaker, you are a constituent by virtue of the fact that you live in an area that is represented by that lawmaker. You're a constituent and you matter to that lawmaker, whether that is a state, federal, or local lawmaker. You matter to them because you live in their district. If you are a voting constituent, you matter a little bit more because you vote and they care about getting elected because they want to be in public office, because presumably they want to do good for the people in their district. And so they can tell whether or not we are registered to vote and whether or not we vote. They can't tell how we vote, but they can tell what party we're registered to vote, or what party we're registered with, and whether or not we vote. If we are active voters, meaning we vote in primaries and special elections, we're going to matter a bit more, because then our lawmakers are going to know this is someone who's really paying attention to what's happening politically, because sadly in our country, most folks who are registered voters are not actively voting. They're not voting all the time. If we are political donors, not necessarily even to that lawmaker, but somebody who's willing to put some skin in the game, so to speak, financially speaking, and it doesn't even have to be big dollars, but just willing to write some checks, even here or there, that means we're going to matter even a little bit more to a lawmaker, because that says to them that we're willing to get involved both in the ballot box and also, as I said, put our money where our mouth is, so to speak. But at the very top of the pyramid in terms of power and importance are people that personally know the decision maker and have a good relationship with him or her. And what's really exciting about this is that it means that anybody can get to the top of that power pyramid. You don't have to be a constituent, meaning you don't have to even live in the district. You don't have to be a registered voter, so you don't even have to be presumably a legal citizen in this country. You don't have to be a registered voter. You don't have to be 18 years old. You just have to personally know that decision maker and have a good relationship with his or her. And there's tremendous power in that. And so that's really our goal, is to elevate ourselves, work our way up to the top of that pyramid by getting to know our decision makers. And there is a way to do that and to really work our way up that pyramid. And that's what we really want to think about doing. It is hard to do that with a member of Congress because they are busy people. They represent such large numbers of people, but we can get to know their staff in somewhat, and we can at least, they will get to know us and they get to know our name. And it's easier than we may think. And we want to really, again, demystify that a bit. So it's not impossible, and it's something that we should certainly be striving for. So as I said, I want to start with the basics, which is understanding or knowing who our lawmakers are. And I never want to assume that people all know who their members of Congress are. So everyone in the United States is represented by 2 U.S. senators and 1 U.S. representative, also called congressman or congresswoman. So everyone has 2 U.S. senators. And it's the link there. And again, we'll make this available in both a handout and in the PowerPoint slides. You clicked on that link, it would take you to a website where you could search by state to find your U.S. senator. So it is simply searchable by state. So those senators represent the state in which you live. For U.S. representatives, you would have to search more specifically by your address, and you would be able to find who represents you by virtue of where in the particular state you live. So that's the first step, is know who your representatives, who your members of Congress are. When you look at those individuals, you want to go a little further and find out a little bit about them. Do they sit on, are they, what committees do they sit on? Are they in a leadership position? We'll talk a little bit about doing your homework and learning a little bit about those folks. But they're not all created equal in terms of their power. But the first step is to just know who they are. So that's the first step. And then you want to find out where they are. So all of those federal lawmakers obviously have offices in Washington, D.C., but they also have local websites in their home states. So for some of you, you live in very large states where it may not be possible to get to their local in-district offices. Sometimes they have several in-state what they call in-district offices in their home states. Sometimes they have one. It's going to depend on the size of the state. Where it's located in terms of close proximity to you is going to vary as well. But we want to check that out. So again, you can check where their set home offices are, and you want to really find out where those places are. You also want to visit their websites to find out where they are going to be when they're back at home. So they have recess periods. They have those periodically and sometimes more frequently than not throughout the year. And during the summer, this summer in particular, is going to pose a great opportunity for them, the members of Congress, being out and around at a lot of events in their districts. That is because we have November elections coming up. Many of them are running for re-election or they are out stumping, if you will, or campaigning for others who are running for re-election or for election. And so this summer poses a great opportunity because many of those members of Congress will be at home in your state having town halls, hosting town halls, participating in town halls. They will be out and around at lots and lots of campaign events. It's a great opportunity to go see them, introduce yourselves, meet them, stick out your handshake, and then be able to follow up with them. So you want to sort of see where they're out and around. They also host often district hours back home in their states, and you can visit with them, do an in-person visit, both in Washington, D.C., as well as in the district. You do not need to only visit with them. Washington, D.C. is not the only place that we can meet our members of Congress. Requesting a meeting is generally these days done online. It used to be all done by phone. It is now almost always done initially with an online request. So if you go to their websites, you will find a form that you can request to meet with your members of Congress. Again, I encourage people, unless you're going to be in Washington, D.C., try to do this back home in your district. Find out when they're going to be back home and request to meet with them back home. And this is just sort of a sample template, if you will, that you could copy and paste as a way to explain that you're a member of the National MPS Society and that you'd like to meet with them to talk about your interest in mucopolysaccharidosis or MPS diseases. And you want to make sure in your request that you state that you are a constituent. And I always give my name and my address because you want to make sure that it jumps out at them that you're someone that lives in their district. Again, making sure that it's very clear to them that you are one of their constituents, because that will bump you up in the queue, so to speak, in terms of getting you a meeting. If I, as someone who works for the National MPS Society, contacts a lawmaker and says, I would like to schedule a meeting, say, for Stephanie Bozarth, and she's a constituent, I'm much more likely to get a meeting than if I call and say, I'm a consultant working for the society, and I, Diane Pickles, would like a meeting. That's much less effective than if I'm going in with a constituent. So some tips for success in actually getting the meeting. Again, as a constituent, you'll generally be successful when you put in a request in getting a meeting. Particularly in election season, most constituents are going to be successful in getting a meeting. But some general tips for success: be politely persistent. You may have to follow up. I'd love to say that their schedulers are great at getting back to you and getting back to you quickly, but you might need to be persistent and follow up. Always be polite, but do be persistent. Be very open to meeting with their staff. It is very, very rare that you will get to meet with the lawmaker, at least initially, and maybe not even at all, or they might duck their head into the meeting, and we need to be comfortable and okay with that. And I would say, know that it's sometimes the best relationships are actually with their staff. They can be more accessible. They are the eyes and ears of their boss or their bosses, and sometimes it can be easier to build a relationship with them. But well, be open to those opportunities, and you still they can make the introduction for you. They're the ones that can really get you in front of their bosses. So be very open to that. And as I mentioned earlier, be really looking for, and if you go to their website and you follow their daily, they'll post their calendar of where they're appearing in districts. Get on their email list, follow them on Twitter, follow them on Facebook. They will be posting where they're appearing, where they're going to be, what events they're going to, and what they're hosting. When you can get out and go to those places, do it, and stick your hand out when you can get in front of them and make an introduction and say, such a pleasure to meet you. My name is Diane Pickles. I'm a constituent. I'd love to talk with you at some point about rare diseases and MPS diseases in particular. I'll contact your office, and then follow up. It can be a nice way. And then when you follow up, say, I met you at the town hall meeting 2 weeks ago in X community. So really look for those opportunities where you can find them. It's a great follow-up. In terms of cultivating relationships with lawmakers, and it really is, I think, about cultivating a relationship rather than a one-time meeting. And we really, as it says in this last bullet here, I think the number one thing that I want to emphasize is it's important to take the time to invest in getting to know our members of Congress, any lawmaker that we want to be an effective advocate with. Invest in multiple meetings and conversations. It doesn't even have to be a meeting, but conversations, multiple touch points, if you will, rather than seeking one meeting or one conversation. Really look to cultivate a relationship and really get yourself to the top of that pyramid. Don't be intimidated. It can be a little intimidating at first, particularly if you're meeting with them in their offices, or it's the first time or two that you're meeting with a lawmaker or their staff. I've done this a ton of times. I've done lobbying at the state level and at the federal level, and I've done a lot of it. I still get nervous before a lobby meeting, always, every single time. I know they put their pants on one leg at a time like everybody else, and I still get intimidated a little bit every time, or a little bit nervous. That's normal, but try to just sort of push yourself past that and remember that they represent you, they work for you, and know that going in, and that you're the expert in your own story, and you are an expert on MPS diseases, and they are not. Get to know them. I talked a little bit about when you go to their website, to find out who your members of Congress are, do some homework, learn about them and their background. So you want to know what committees they sit on, but you also want to do some homework to learn about their background, what they care about, what issues matter to them. That's going to help you do two different things. One, it's going to help you have just a nice conversation with them, but it's also going to help you make connections possibly between MPS, rare diseases, health issues, etc., and things that they care about. You might find a really nice connection point on something that really jumps out at you to say, wow, they're a potential advocate for MPS policy issues because they care a lot about children's health issues, or they're an advocate on children's issues, maybe not children's health, but on children's issues. Or they've been a real champion on social justice issues, and I could maybe potentially make a link here. So look for connections in learning about their background. Look at, maybe people in common. Look for, maybe there's an organization that they're involved with that maybe somebody at. Be looking for those connections. But most of all, most importantly rather, just sort of look to understand what it is that they care about, because that will help you just have a more meaningful conversation, and again, build that relationship. Share your personal story. It is your most powerful tool. It is your most powerful source of information to be impactful about MPS diseases, but it is also your best way to make an impact on that individual, to be memorable, to make them remember why you met with them. And also, it's a great way to have a conversation. That's why you're there to meet with them. So to really, rather than rely on facts and figures and statistics, share your story and make it personal, and be personable and conversational. And part of being personable and conversational is to be a good listener. Remember that we strive for a dialogue, not a monologue. And I think that very often what can happen in these types of meetings is we get nervous and we jabber on and on rather than listening and having a dialogue. Ask questions, pause. What do you know about rare diseases? Have you ever known anyone with a rare disease? What do you think about what I've shared with you? Ask some questions, pause, listen. Listen for cues of what they might care about, what they might want to hear more about, etc. That's going to all be things that help you build that relationship with that individual. Some specific strategies for cultivating the relationship in an ongoing way, so it's not a one and done meeting or conversation. This is a long list of some potential ideas. Dialoguing with them in an ongoing way through email, phone calls, social media, great way. As I said, follow them on Twitter, tweet directly at them. If you are a social media person, engage with those lawmakers on social media. Definitely attend their events, as we've talked about. Personally visiting them is a great idea. Sending them relevant news articles when things appear in the paper, mentioning them in the letter to the editor. If they do meet with you, or, you have a nice, conversation with them, or there's an issue you want them to be paying attention to, think about writing a letter to the editor and mentioning them in that letter to the editor. They will notice it. They will see it. Then send them a copy of it by email. Sending holiday greetings, can be something impactful. I will say one thing about snail mail is that if you send, we used to really encourage people to do handwritten thank you notes and things of that nature. And I will say that snail mail, regular mail to the congressional offices gets torn apart and takes forever to get to lawmakers. It's probably not even worth doing it. I would rely on email just because of the security being what it is. And last but not least would be to extend invitations to those members of Congress to come to events that you might be involved in and hosting back at home. Are you doing an MPS Awareness Day event at your child's school? Invite them to come. Even if they don't show up, that invitation matters and gets noticed. And if they don't come, send them some photos and say, hey, I'm sorry you couldn't make it, but I wanted to share some pictures of the event with you. If you're hosting a house party or some other local event, again, invite them to things back home in the district that are opportunity. It gives you an opportunity to talk to them, to share with them a little bit about your world and what's happening in your world. And it gets your name and your face in front of them in a meaningful way. And that's what it's all about. And again, continues the dialogue and continues to build that relationship. And last, but absolutely by no means least, number one thing is to share yourself and share your story, and to really remember that that is what it's all about. And there's a couple big important pieces to why this is so valuable. As I said earlier, I think that this is how we will be memorable. This is the most important way to be an advocate, because I think our stories are how we advocate for what we care about. But it's also, I think, it's the takeaways that we want these lawmakers to have about the issues that we're focused on. And they use those stories as they then advocate for those issues themselves. And so for so many reasons, sharing our stories about our families, about MPS diseases, and sharing ourselves in a very authentic way, meaningful way, and really just being yourselves not trying to be a professional lobbyist, just trying to be yourself, a mom, an aunt, a cousin, a grandmother, whoever it is, an MPS survivor, somebody who is impacted by MPS. Be that individual, share that story, and bring that to the relationship with your members of Congress. And if you do that, and you show up and continue to show up and communicate with that lawmaker, I guarantee you they can't help but notice you, and they can't help but be moved by that. And that is the way that we will build a relationship with those lawmakers. And so it's really as easy as that, but I don't mean to minimize it in terms of the time it takes to do it. These relationships are not built in a day. And as I said, it's never one date that gets that done. So that was, as I said, a quick and dirty overview of a lot of information, but I hope we've given you some good ideas and food for thought in terms of how to find your lawmakers and how to really cultivate a real relationship with them in order to deepen your advocacy and be able to become a better advocate for MPS and related diseases so that we can really advance treatments and one day a cure for MPS. So with that, I don't see any questions that have come in. I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. As I said, we will make the slide deck, the handout, and the webinar recording available to each of you. I want to thank you so very much for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedules to join us, and we hope it's been an excellent use of your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care, everyone. Good night.